wrote, "Unless the kitchen itself is ventilated so that all smells and vapors pass immediately away, they are assured to get into the house, greeting us with their sickly odor in the halls and passages, and finding their way to the topmost bedroom, notwithstanding all contrivances of swing doors and crooked passages." Now you look at this. They're talking about the odor of the kitchen as a sickly odor, as a stench. There's nothing more different than the modern sense. When you welcome people over to your home, you might be more in tune with an old Jewish proverb that says, when you are inviting guests over, cook onions, even if you don't use them. Because when people come into a house where there's cooking onions, it's like, that smells like dinner. That would have been horrifying to someone in the Victorian era. That may seem strange. That is such an odd idea that I tend to buttress it with another quote. This is from the architect Robert Kerr, 1865, talking about how to build a house. "The means of communication, or dinner route, ought to be primarily as direct, straight, and easy as could be contrived, and as free as possible from intervening traffic. At the same time, it is even more essential still that the transmission of kitchen smells to the family apartments be guarded against, not merely by the interposition of a passage door, but by such expedients as an elongated and perhaps circuitous route, an interposed current of outer air, and so on. Expedients obviously depending upon their success upon those very qualities which so obstruct the service and cool the dishes." Here we see a problem. You read about foreigners dining in England and they complain about the fact that at dinner the food often arrives cold. It arrives cold because they have put the kitchen as far out into the backyard as they could and then put twisting passages in between. Try to imagine getting from your kitchen to your living room where it is deliberately designed so that no possible smell could escape to get from one to the other, so they put a maze in between. If you walk through some old English houses, as I've done in my trips over there, and you try to trace the route from the kitchen to the dining room, and then imagine a multi-course banquet of some 10 or 15 dishes with groups of servants running up and down this maze, it must seem like madness. Now, why would people have this attitude? Well, one of the reasons they would have this attitude in Dickens' own era, I would hope that when I go to your houses, as you certainly will all invite me, I would hope that when I go to your houses, I would come in and I would smell the wonderful sense of cooking meats and vegetables and spices. And I would smell those because of the fact that you're probably cooking with gas or electricity while the Victorians were cooking with coal. So, if you're cooking with a coal stove, you need that, there's going to be some amount of escaping vapors from a coal stove. So a Victorian kitchen did not smell primarily of those wonderful spices and roasting meat and vegetables. And oh, I'm making myself hungry again. It smelled like coal fires. It probably smelled also, they did a lot of, there was a certain level of butchering in the kitchen. And there was also really not a sense of the importance of cleanliness through most of this era. We're talking about an era in the 1850s. They didn't really have the sense, you kept things clean for appearance's sake, rather than really because of the fact that you understood and believed in the germ theory of disease. They didn't. So you actually had the kitchen where you would have the slops from the intestines of an animal, you would have other items that were sitting around. They didn't move the disgusting bits out of the kitchen. So your kitchen was not a clean, beautiful place. It was a place where no matter how much you cleaned it, there were cinders and ash from the coal, there was smoke from the coal, there was grease and grime that was embedded in the walls. They didn't have ceiling fans. So your walls, literally the walls in the kitchen, would have sometimes decades of grease stuck to the walls. So this was not a pleasant place. This was not a place that anyone would do more than go in, supervise, and then get out to someplace cleaner and neater. That was for the servants, and the servants, that was their job to do that nasty, dirty work. And what were they cooking? Well, they were cooking groceries that they had gotten from a variety of markets. And I say a variety of markets because We modern people, we're used to the idea of going to one big building where you go and you have your greenery and you have your canned and packaged goods and you have your meat and you have your bread. The modern supermarket, that was invented in the 1920s. One of the first ones was in downtown Los Angeles. It was called Hatham's, owned by a Jewish merchant named Isidore Haddam, and he created the idea of going and doing one-stop shopping, of one place where you had a greengrocers, a butcher's counter, your packaged goods and flowers, and your bread. This was remarkable at the time that it happened. A Victorian was used to the idea of you would go to, frequently, you can go, if you look at old Victorian maps, you will see places called Butcher Street. You'll see places called Green Street from a greengrocer's. You will see a Baker Street. There were streets of these things, and you were going all over town to get the items for your meal. And what did you do to do that? Well, the lady of the house would probably go out shopping, and she would say up to the butcher or greengrocer, I'll have this, this, and that, and she would walk away empty-handed, and it would be delivered to her home. So there is something much more complex. There are all of these deliveries that are coming in via the servants' entrance, of course, and these deliveries are coming in from all of these different people. Well, of course, a sensible lady of the house would develop a relationship with all of those people, because otherwise what might happen? She would go and she would think, oh, those carrots look lovely, I'll have them. And he would say, they'll be on their way. And then the carrots he's keeping under the counter that are several weeks older are the ones that actually get delivered. So you develop a relationship in each one of these places with all of the different people who supply all the different items that are part of your meal. Now, one remarkable thing about the Dickens family, one thing that was very, very unusual about the Dickens family, was that Charles did most of the shopping. Charles Dickens loved to walk around London and listen to people talk. He went to the markets, he went to public spaces to listen to the accents, to listen to learn as much as he could about the technical terms, so that when he wrote his book, if he was writing someone who was a butcher, he would write them sounding like a butcher. We have an example of this in a letter in 1842, quoted in the book Dickens and Women. He wrote to a friend about the vivid slang of a butcher who was selling him a breast of veal for dinner. Charles Dickens was probably one of the only married men who was down there negotiating with the butcher on a regular basis, because usually that would have been the woman's job. Charles did it because he liked it. He was out there picking up slang from that very butcher. The American writer Nathaniel Hawthorne, who visited Charles Dickens, recorded, quote, he was making bargains at butchers and bakers, and doing, so far as he could, whatever duty pertains to an English wife.